Welcome to Better and Better Psychology Podcast. I am your host, psychotherapist M. Gary Neuman, with my wise psychotherapist co-host and daughter, Esther Neuman.
Hello.
Well, last time we had that incredible experience with Corey Richards. Tonight we have another incredible guest, Dr. Rosmarin, who is a Harvard professor and talks about anxiety. It's going to be incredible. We'll get to him in a second. I really appreciate him being here. What have you been thinking about?
So I was thinking about, I thought it was appropriate as we're going to be talking about anxiety and those kinds of things. But I was thinking about, I had parents in my office who often, we as parents, we're always trying to give our kids better than we had it and help our kids and make sure our kids don't go through like hard times and if they're sad. And really, what I tell parents is we always want to rescue our child. We don't want them to go through the hard thing. And really, the hard things that kids go through is what makes them resilient. It's what makes them strong. It's what helps them get through adulthood. So what I say to parents is this: as they're going through the hard times, surrounding them with a ton of love, helping them through it, talking it through with them, and just giving them support so that they know when they're going through a hard time, they have loving people to get them through that. And that really takes kids throughout their lives to be able to
I love it. Yeah.
Build on that.
For sure. I think we're too stuck on making everything happy for them.
Yeah.
And the truth is we grow through challenge and through discomfort.
Right.
But to your point, childhood is where we're supposed to make them feel like they're not going through it alone.
Right.
That's your point.
Right.
And therefore then you grow up and you feel, secure.
You feel secure and powerful, and that you can do anything. That you can do anything, and that the challenges in life, which do make us powerful and amazing, help us grow. And
That's
work
wonderful.
together. All right.
I do want to. I don't mean to correct you, but you said in there that we want to give our children a better childhood than we had, and
I don't. That applies to you as opposed to me,
but not to you. I'm sorry.
Let me
There's
be
no
clear.
better
As my
childhood.
dad, I no,
right.
no.
Moving
I was
along,
at Disney multiple times a month at one point in my life. So I think I can't. Clearly.
Case. No further questions,
There are a lot of challenges at Disney, by the way. I had to wait on lines.
It's true.
It's very hard.
Yes. We could write that, like the Disney childhood and what it teaches you about life.
Yeah. Teaches me that.
Okay. Let's get to our.
All right, moving on.
Let's get to our brighter guest than us.
Yes,
here.
The Harvard professor here.
Yes. Whenever you say Harvard, I love that. That's I don't do accents, but that's it. Dr. David Rosmarin is the author of Thriving with Anxiety, and that's why I had him on. Okay, because the rest of us were all talking about running away, getting rid of it, get rid of your anxiety.
Yeah.
This genius wants us to run toward anxiety. Okay, so I don't know what he's talking about, but we're going to figure it out. But his book is amazing. I do know what he's talking about because of the book. But nonetheless, get the book, Thriving with Anxiety, 9 Tools to Make Your Anxiety Work for You. It's up here on the board and HarperCollins published it. He's an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, program director at McLean Hospital, founder of Center for Anxiety, which provides services to over 1,000 patients yearly in many states. He's an expert on spirituality and mental health, and he has been featured in Scientific American, Boston Globe, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Good Morning America, and you'll find him at dhrosman.com. Rosmarin.com. Anyway, Doctor, it is wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. And congratulations on your success with this great new book.
Thanks for having me. Just watching the two of you have that interaction just it made my
All right, the insanity continues. Okay. Also, he's got a TED Talk, by the way.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I was thinking that when you were saying that. I said that was what you missed there.
I know. I had a written
TED Talk. But the TED Talk was very impressive because I think you had to memorize the entire thing.
It's so anxiety provoking. It was probably one of the hardest things I've done in my whole career. I was petrified the whole week beforehand. I'm memorizing the lines. There's no teleprompters, right? So you're up there. It's you on a red dot in basically a film studio with however many hundreds of thousands of people there, and you got to get every line right. And it was just, wow, and great. One of the best things I've done for the reasons that you said, Esther, at the beginning. Like you laid up this top conversation perfectly.
Tell us why is it that we should be not trying to get rid of anxiety? Why aren't we all just taking Xanax and trying to get rid of anxiety?
Yeah.
Why not do
Please
that?
tell us.
I do want to clarify at the outset that there is clinical anxiety, and we do want to tamp that down. But that's when it interferes with your life. Okay, if you can't go to work, if you can't go to school, I mean, literally cannot.
If it's a real functional issue, then that's something obviously you could look at other options. But we're talking about
and those other options though will never get rid of your anxiety completely, and that's where I think that sometimes the professionals, my professional colleagues, don't get it right, is that we're trying to eliminate the emotion of anxiety, but that's not healthy. Human beings were built with this emotion and many others, sadness and disgust and happiness and joy and exhilaration, and they serve a function and they serve a purpose. But anxiety, there is a continuum. On the one hand, clinical, we want to get that down to a mid-range so you can function, but to get rid of all of your anxiety completely would not be advantageous. And our quest for an anxiety-free life is, I believe, creating the anxiety epidemic today.
So tell me about, why is it creating how is the quest for no anxiety or lessening it causing the problem?
It's very simple. When we perceive anything as a threat, your level of adrenaline is going to surge. It's a protective mechanism that your body has. That adrenaline will create anxiety symptoms, tachycardia, heart racing, right? Difficulty breathing, or you're increasing oxygenated blood in order to power your heart. You have a constriction of the blood vessels, so you have tingling and numbness and sensations in the extremities. There can be dizziness because there's pupil dilation. And all of these physiological symptoms naturally occur when we have that shot of adrenaline. Now, if you perceive low levels of anxiety as a malady, as something's wrong with me, what's going to happen to your adrenaline immediately when your anxiety hits a 2?
It's going to raise.
It's going to go immediately up to an 8 or a 9. And there's a reason why this is one of the number one causes of people coming into ERs in the United States of America. We have turned normal anxiety, normal physiological changes that happen to every human being in the world into a disease. And when we interpret that as a problem, then it's a cascade. It's an immediate cascade. And I believe that's the core of the epidemic.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you said something interesting. I think it was in your TED Talk that people nowadays have higher levels of anxiety than psychiatric patients in 1950. Did I get that right?
Is that
true? Healthy American school children today have greater levels of anxiety than hospitalized psychiatry patients from the 1950s. That's correct.
That's
flabbergasting. I mean, that's incredible. What does that do to?
I think it's due to our overinterpretation of normal anxiety as a problem. We live in a society where we drive on cantilevered surfaces, we have overhead lighting, we have HVAC systems, we have door plumbing, and we have, really all these accoutrements of the modern world. We have these incredible electronic appendages that we can use to manipulate all sorts of things in different time zones and communicate with people. But our emotions aren't predictable. Sometimes I wake up and I feel a little off kilter. This morning I slept really well last night and I felt tired this morning. I don't know why. It's just, that's the nature of the human condition, is such that you can't control it and predict it. And I think the delta is just, it's too much today. So
when you say it's too much today, it's meaning that we're having it's too cushy for us today and we can't deal with the changes in that?
I think it's a part of it, but I think it has to do with control and predictability.
That nowadays we feel like we have more control and predictability, so we get more shaken when we don't, because naturally we don't.
Interesting.
It's exactly, I think, at the core of the epidemic.
I see.
And the quest for an anxiety-free life really stems from a desire to have control over something that we can't. We can't control that.
Right. Well, that's what I always pictured anxiety as, the less control you have, the more your anxiety goes up, and the more sense of control you have, your anxiety goes down. Does that track?
I don't know if that's to some degree it's true. Losing control creates anxiety. But what about letting go of control?
Okay.
What about going on a roller coaster where you're actually seeking the adrenaline rush? I wouldn't call that anxiety. I would call that exhilaration. So as long as it's voluntary and you know that it's coming, that letting go does not have to be an adverse experience.
So the letting go, if I go through life thinking that I have no freaking control over this.
I'm on a roller coaster.
You know, I'm on a roller coaster. Like that metaphorically is reducing my anxiety, because the anxiety is built on a need for control and predictability, which that's how control
Correct. Now, and life isn't an amusement park, so I don't recommend staying on the roller coaster.
According to my childhood, it was.
But it's important to go once in a while, sit down and go for that ride, let go, embrace that aspect of the control. I think to me, it's a daily practice. Actually part of a spiritual practice for me, where I just, for at least one moment every day, try to understand the limits of my control and actually to embrace that voluntarily, as opposed to having it sort of hit me when I don't want it, which creates anxiety. Yeah. Since I started doing that, things have tamped down quite a bit for me, interestingly.
No, it speaks to your point. When we interviewed Dr. Richard Weissman, he's a researcher on luck, and that was one of the things he said, that an attribute of lucky people are that they're going with the flow. They're looking for opportunities, and if they're going in one direction but another path opens, they're like, oh, okay, I'll go there, and that brings people reduced anxiety, and it makes them lucky somehow.
Fascinating.
So yeah, so it speaks to your point that you mentioned something else that children in more impoverished circumstances sometimes have less anxiety than the typical American child. Is that potentially because they are so used to not being in control that they kind of go with it?
Yeah, firstly, the data here is shocking. I mean, in middle-income countries, people have half as much anxiety as they do in high-income countries. Wow. And in low-income countries, it's half as much anxiety as in middle-income countries.
Wow.
So if you think about, I like to say a typical 6-year-old girl living in Peru who does not have running water in her village is 4 times less likely to have an anxiety disorder compared to her same aged counterpart living in the United States of America, who is using her voice rather, to order things on Amazon. Right, and has 3 iPads and a Netflix account. It's shocking. So just to really make that statistic pop, it's not just like a little bit. It's a massive chasm.
Yeah. That is so important. I mean, it's very meaningful. So take us to what to do. I don't want to rush too much to it, but how do we take the kid who is ordering through Amazon, and how do we help them get to the reduced anxiety and not become the epidemic that we have in anxiety today?
Yeah, I think in many ways that is the question, because we're not going to change access to the electronic appendages that we have. We're not going to change access to our economics, at least not deliberately. We're not going to.
Well, not only that, but keep in mind that it's probably our anxiety or fear of it that creates all this, right? Because we want. And think about it. We create more things that give people a sense of control and more power. So it's really the anxiety underneath. I don't know if it ever becomes anxiety, but that really creates this whole system of feeling control and predictability. We try to maybe more predict the future for ourselves, so that we don't have that anxiety. But of course, then the irony, of course, is how much more anxiety it produces.
Yeah,
but what do you do?
I think some of the strategies here are really embracing anxiety intentionally and letting go intentionally in the context that we're in. So I'm not recommending that everybody pick up and move to Mexico or Colombia, and give up our cars and televisions and AirPods and all the accoutrements of the modern world. But I do think that if we are going to continue to live in this society that we're in, which I imagine we will, then we need to have very deliberate practice to embrace the suck. Mm-hmm. To put ourselves in situations where we experience the anxiety, just like going to the gym builds your physical fitness, we need to do things to build our emotional resilience and our emotional fitness. I think this should be happening in schools, children, where there are emotionally challenging things that kids are pushed to do and that they're graded on, maybe even that they grade themselves on.
What would be an example of that?
Going over to if someone's socially anxious, going over to a stranger, obviously within a safe context for kids.
Or a stranger in school.
A strange person in school, who you haven't spoken to, and starting a conversation.
Forcing them to speak publicly at the school. Things like that.
Speaking publicly is great. Right. It's great. doing something that's going to make you embrace uncertainty, like something that gives you physical, maybe even symptoms of feeling dizzy or, spinning around.
But then how do you help them through it? So the assumption is we'll push our kid to do it, and then they'll do it, and then they'll feel good about it and say, wow, you see, I embraced it. And I did. But how do you get them to that? Is it just, you just have to push them, and we as parents today we just don't have the guts to push them through it? Or do you have to help that kid? How do you get them through that little process of fear and anxiety?
I think your daughter said it brilliantly at the beginning, which is often parents are the ones rescuing their kids. So the natural vicissitudes of life will present opportunities for people to face their anxiety, as long as we don't mess that up by rescuing them from it.
Okay.
Being with them and coaching them through it, showing that they're not alone, which was what both of you said at the beginning, I think is spot on. But stopping the process is not going to help. But I would also give kids challenges to do things that are emotionally challenging for them. Like if you're having a hard day, then push a little bit harder in that day to get the emotional resilience, just like you would in order to work on your cognitive skills or work on your math skills or work on your physical abilities to climb a climbing wall or whatever it is. But we don't speak about emotions in this way. We don't speak about it as something to surmount, as a challenge, as an obstacle to be able to grow and push through resilience. And well, we're not building a resilient generation, lo and behold.
Yeah. What do you say to parents who might feel like, how do I know if I'm not overdoing it? Like, I know if I ask my kid to, run a mile and he's, 8, okay, he can run a mile. I'm not going to ask him to run 10 miles. That's something that I can kind of feel and taste, but emotions, parents get scared. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just asking too much of them.
Right.
I think that's exactly the point. Parents get scared when it comes to emotions. And when it comes to physical, you sort of understand, like, if it's running more miles than the kid has years, it's probably not a good idea. I think that's the pediatrician's rule of thumb, by the way. But when it comes to emotions, we're so avoidant of anything that might be emotionally painful. We don't even have a barometer. That's a problem.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And is it something that, can it be something, like parents push them in sports, pushing kids in sports? Like, would that be a way to work through it? Like if they're nervous about something where they need to, is that a good space for this kind of
it could be,
exercise?
Yeah, 100% pushing through. Like I'm nervous, I'm not going to do well.
Right.
As a pitcher and I'm pitching today. Well, let's do it and see how well it goes. Or I don't want to go to school today because I have a test and I haven't studied.
Right.
I'm not letting that kid off from going to school. If they're going to school, they're going to take the test. How are they going to learn otherwise?
So you're saying that life presents itself with all kinds of tests. Stop avoiding helping your children avoid these tests.
Right. Or like if the kid didn't study, right? Let's say the kid just didn't study. You say, like, well, I guess you got to go to school and do the best you can. And they're going to feel those feelings. But at the same time, I think, I guess my question to you is, let's say a kid is worried about a test, right? So then are we as parents giving our kids tools? Like, okay, if you're worried about that, let me help you with a tutor. Let me help you work through that issue so you feel confident, or kind of just let them go and be there for them?
It's both. In some ways, if they're not prepared, it's a better opportunity for emotional resilience.
Okay.
Right? Because you're building that aspect. You might not be building their academic confidence though. So obviously there are checks and balances that have to be put into place. But in every case, like in the clinical world, at Center for Anxiety at my offices, that this is what we teach our clients to do, which is we use exposure therapy. We help them to face their fears. And I think the biggest thing is once somebody knows at any age that this is what they need to do for themselves, they will rise to the challenge.
Right.
That seed has to germinate, has to take root. Once it takes root, the tree will grow.
Right. No, that's interesting. I've had that with my kids at different points. My son, who he has certain exceptionalities, and I think we talked about it. Like as soon as he knew that I got to strengthen my leg, and then he took charge of it, and he's like, I want to go to the gym and I want to exercise. It's giving the kid the power to get through it. And you're saying that's a better way of just empowering the children to move forward with that, to build 100%. That resilience. Okay.
Yeah. One of my kids many years ago had a fear of bugs, and At first,
That's
I'm
a hard
like,
fear.
What did you do? What did you do to this child?
I can handle it, right. At first, I'm blaming myself.
You're a very
like, it's
clean
my fault.
household.
I'm the anxiety, an anxiety like expert, so to speak, and my only child, one of my children has a fear. And then I'm like, okay, I can help him myself. And I'm like, no, this is not a good idea. First, I stopped blaming myself. And second, I realized I'm not going to be this kid's therapist. So I called one of my friends and I said, do you mind doing a couple of sessions with my son on bug phobia? And he taught my son to go out and put the bugs on his hand, touch them, go out, play with the dirt, have ants on him. And as soon as he got it, I think it was 6 or 7 at the time. As soon as he got it, I think they met twice and he overcame it. And I've seen so many cases where that didn't happen and the anxiety spiraled out and became multifaceted. And it wasn't just bugs, it was travel and it was worry. And it's a life lesson that anxiety is part of life. We have to metabolize it and we have to face it and embrace it.
No, amazing. And you mentioned something about, I went to the devices, because I know everyone always has that question, or at least parents have that question. You mentioned the devices. How is that not helping us? Do we try to hold back for ourselves, for our children? How does that interact with anxiety?
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt has a really seminal book on this, The Anxious Generation, and he makes a very strong case not only for a causal effect of smartphone-based childhood, as he puts it aptly, on anxiety in children, but also the case for the need for legal reform around this issue, which I agree with him on that matter. To me, the psychological mechanism, though, is one of control. When you're on your phone and somebody says something that you don't like and it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's so much easier to avoid that situation than when you're in the room with them.
Right. Sure.
How about the idea of devices? Because that happened at the invent of the phone. I'm sure I always tell people, sometimes parents do say to me, oh my gosh, how are kids going to be raised nowadays? The texting. And I said, look, I don't know how it's going to work out. It probably will adjust. I'm sure when the phone was invented, I'm sure parents were saying, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible. People are just going to be talking on the phone, not going to be talking to each other anymore face to face. So every generation, we're always worried and terrified about what is happening. I mean, clearly we see in data that this is affecting kids. But as far as screen time and things of that sort, have you figured out as far as what anxiety that causes or doesn't, or to be worried or not to be worried?
I have colleagues who are looking at, blue light and, all sorts of physiological mechanisms. There is certainly something to be said about sleep deprivation, that phones keep kids up later at night, and sleep deprivation or lack of sleep is directly tied to greater stress and greater anxiety during the day. People make worse decisions when they're sleep deprived. And
I understand. Right, that's ancillary. I got
it. But to me, that's not the main psychological effect. It's the fact that we have such a great deal of manipulation over the pixels on our screens, and the delta between that and the level of control that we don't have over our emotional state creates this disparity that's so unnerving.
Right. So we like the idea. We like the idea on our phones as adults or as children that we do control a lot of things. We control our information. We control which news we want to watch. We control the way we can think, and we have so much control. I think that's part of the addiction, which I haven't thought about it that way, because I think most people just think it's addiction because it's like flashy and it's true. You're controlling.
You can manipulate
so much.
You're manipulating hundreds of items a day, and at your beck and call. You're sending when you want. There's a lot of
you're avoiding the text when you want.
Yes.
I don't want to talk to them. I do. I don't. There's so much going on.
We need a family therapy session about
that.
There you go. There's so much going on.
We have many routes to reach each other, including me showing up at his house. So.
Exactly, or vice versa. You never know. But so it is interesting that trains us to feel this, to your point, false sense of predictability, and then therefore when we go out in life, which just so far we haven't been able to create a cell phone of life, that we're going to be faced with a lot of lack of predictability, which causes
Yeah,
anxiety.
I don't know if getting rid of phones is the answer. I mean, I think pushing them off until high school is a good idea. But I'll tell you a couple of things. I was last night. I gave a talk on Harvard College for a bunch of students, and these are obviously very high functioning, high caliber individuals with all sorts of control or perceived control over the world. And I asked them a series of questions, and it really stunned them. I said, "Who here in this room chose when, whether, or where to be born?"
Right.
What would your life look like if you were, only had one arm, or if you didn't have the intellectual capacity that you had, or if you were born into a different socioeconomic bracket, or born in the 17th century? And none of those factors are actually in your control.
Right.
Wow.
So
you wiped out an entire Harvard class year last night.
They all had to have anxiety because they didn't realize.
Now they need
no control.
Yes, they need all kinds of help.
Well, but my goal was to get them to embrace the limits of control. Right. And I think when we intentionally do that, in some ways it's terrifying, but it's actually quite freeing to recognize that we do have some degree of choice and maybe control in some regards, but it's actually very limited, and that's okay. If we can get to a place of acceptance about that, including embracing the anxiety and then getting to a place of letting go, then I think we can actually thrive in the modern world in this age of anxiety.
Yeah, no, I get your point that you're trying to show people that, we didn't plan where we came from. We didn't predict very important parts of our life, our childhoods. So much of our life we did not predict, we did not have control over, and yet we still existed. We have the incredible ability, I think, to reduce anxiety that I try to help people is with flexibility. As human beings, we're very creative. We're very flexible. And what sounds like impossible or terrible, very commonly we're able to manage under those circumstances. That really is what differentiates us so much with the animal, world per se. Right.
And knowing that we can get through that people don't have that perception that it might look hard, but you can make it through. You're going to have to make it through,
Right.
And you can get through. And that builds, ironically, you're saying that might reduce anxiety because you get through it in a more powerful way.
Right. You're saying the more experiences we have of that, the better we are with anxiety, because obviously anxiety gets into our head and we begin to tell ourselves a story that makes it so much more complicated for us. So the more it's in us to just be able to manage through without the tremendous fear of control and predictability, the better off we are.
Yeah, and your point that it's funny, most of the big significant portions in people's lives are out of everyone's control. Yeah. You're going to turn a certain age when you are. You're going to meet the person you're going to marry at a certain point. You're going to I deal with women with postpartum depression and childbirth, and a lot of women sadly have traumatic births in many ways, and they planned it, and it was supposed to go a certain way, and it doesn't. And those experiences, they shape us. But I think you're saying the people, when you can accept that and you can understand that, and almost accepting your emotions. I think you had said that before, like when you are okay with your emotions, you're satisfied, like you're not running from the anxiety, you're not running from fear, or you're allowing yourself to experience those emotions. That helps in that way.
So what does that mean to experience? So I'm having anxiety, I'm having an issue, right? You would say to me, what?
Let it ride. Don't try to force it away. It's happening for a reason. In fact, try to embrace it, try to accept it. And if there's an area that you're having trouble letting go of, can you actually muster up the courage to recognize the limits of your control in that area and actually let go of the rest? Granted, it's not an easy path to walk, but I think that given the accoutrements of the modern age, we have to.
Right, and as if I'm embracing anxiety, even to your point before, if I have physical symptoms, the physical symptoms are coming now, like you mentioned before.
I would expect that.
Would you say to me, it's okay, it's going to get better, you're not going to faint, you're not going to die, or am I going to faint? I mean, like what
you won't die. I've never lost a patient to anxiety, and I've never had a colleague who lost a patient to anxiety alone. The symptoms of anxiety.
I could get dizzy. I could get lightheaded.
You could, and if you have no history of fainting, I'm very confident you will not faint.
Got it.
In a very, very subset of the population, anxiety can occur.
But knowing that I won't die and likely won't faint, and I'll ride through it, it'll be uncomfortable, but I'll be okay, should reduce my anxiety.
In of itself, that's one of the first steps is accepting it, embracing it, allowing yourself to experience it. It's a human emotion, and it's part of the human experience.
How do you help adults, or what suggestions do you have adults, like children, we can say, just, keep going forward? Do you say to adults when you have things that you're afraid of or make you nervous that you should also try to push through them? We just, last time we had, I told Corey I was never going to be in an avalanche, that I was never going to mountain climb, but maybe you're telling me otherwise. You're not going to convince me, don't worry. But anyway.
I wouldn't do something that's dangerous. That would be called fear. But I would do something that makes you feel anxious that's actually safe. And if there's something that's uncomfortable and you can identify it, just like going to the gym will make you physically stronger, doing that on a weekly basis will make you emotionally more resilient.
That's interesting. I like the gym concept that you build weekly or or twice a week. You do things that make you uncomfortable or a little anxious or anxious. And because we're going to go through life, it'll build better as a person not to be anxious as we grow and as we age.
Right. Like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations or situations you're not necessarily comfortable with. If people don't like large crowds, and going into a crowd and just kind of enjoying it. All of those little things that you do on a daily life, that will prepare. Is that what you're saying? That it'll prepare potentially for the bigger moments?
Yeah, going to the mall, driving in traffic, going through a tunnel, actually getting on a plane.
Sitting in the middle seat.
No.
I'm not doing it.
Oh my God.
You got to drag me, kick and scream. No, but
maybe
that
for a
maybe
short haul. Maybe for a short haul flight.
Maybe I should. No, but maybe you're right.
But
he's right. Maybe you should. We should. We're always avoiding the tunnel and the traffic and the middle seat. And you're saying let it ride. Like put yourself in that position.
Go with it.
I wouldn't do it all the time.
Right,
the goal is to live. You don't live in a gym. You don't live
exactly.
With
I think the gym is an idea. Yeah, it's a great idea.
A couple times a week, a couple times a month.
Yes.
This is part of basic fitness.
Right. Choose the uncomfortable road just because, so that you get your body into shape for it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, I'd love to go. We can talk more. Maybe we'll have you on another time. I really appreciate it. But you've really, you've really opened my mind to that concept of going to the gym, to putting yourself in a position of anxiety to build yourself. I think it's a very, very wise idea. And I really am going to think about it and, try to do it and try to tell people about it. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's just like people take care of their physical health. We know more and more our mind-body connection is imperative, and yet we're not exercising our mental state enough. No, it's
incredible. Thank you very much. So everybody get his book if you want to know more about this, and you need to, because it's very meaningful. And again, the name of the book is Thriving with Anxiety. I remember that part. 9 tools to make your anxiety work for you. I really appreciate Dr. Rosmarin, and thank you for all you do. I appreciate all you do, because it's such a huge topic, and it's comforting to know that there's something practical and wise to start developing to help ourselves. So we really appreciate you writing it and taking the time to share with us. I really will make changes, I think. Yeah. I really will.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
much.
I
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Bye.
Well, that was very enlightening.
Amazing.
In a short period of time, it really has something very very meaningful to offer, very meaningful to give into the space that I haven't heard. I think it's a unique perspective.
And our world changes so rapidly, and it sounds like we're not changing in the way that we need to accommodate the world we're living in.
Right.
And these are very practical, very realistic tools, and an understanding of what's going on in our very rapidly changing environment that affects us and reacting to it. It was brilliant.
Yeah, we better get with it. Yeah. We better get with it.
Go.
Exactly. All right.
Just not anxiously.
Yeah, exactly. Slowly but surely, with some anxiety peppered in on purpose. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to getting together soon. Remember, go to newmanmethod.com. You could get to me at @mgaryneuman. Get to Esther at
Esther Neuman Therapist.
And we just want to wish you good week, good holidays and season. And we look forward to getting back to you on the other side of that. And remember, just keep growing, keep developing, keep facing your anxiety, and keep getting better and
better.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care.